Chakan the Forever Man for Sega Genesis starts off with a very promising premise. Based off of a comic with the same name, you play as Chakan. First of all, just check this guy out. What is this guy? Samurai? Zombie? Ninja? Cowboy? Who knows, but it's definitely not Mario. Chakan is an ancient warrior who long ago was so confident of his fighting skills that he challenged Death himself to a duel. Death agreed with the stipulation that if Chakan wins, he will be granted eternal life. But if Death wins, Chakan will be cursed to carry on as Death's eternal servant. After a battle that raged on for days, Chakan manages to defeat Death, but he didn't read the fine print of the terms and conditions, and it turns out Death tricked him. As the manual states, "I battled Death with spell and steel, and won. Now I suffer my doom." For Death kept his promise with a hideous twist. As my reward, I must wander in agony, haunted by the pain of my victims until the beasts of darkness have been destroyed. So now Chakan has to fight through all of the forces of evil, and only after all evil has been vanquished can he take his final eternal rest. You play as Chakan and the game starts you off in the navigational plane. This can be a little bit confusing, but there are 4 planes to choose from: Earth, Fire, Water, and Air. Each of the 4 planes is broken up into 3 phases. You'll find a weapon that you can take with you at the end of each of the first phases, and there's a boss fight at the end of each of the third phases. But aha! It turns out all of those levels were just part of the first group of worlds called the terrestrial planes. Once you defeat all of those, you move into the elemental planes, where you have to do it all over again in a whole new set of Earth, Wind, Fire, and Water levels, each divided into 3 phases yet again. There's this big grid at the start of the navigational plane that helps you keep track of your progress. When you fight through the phases, gameplay consists of side-scrolling platforming action, and there are some elements of Castlevania here with the creepy settings and horror-themed enemies, but there's also some Metroid here as well. Chakan starts off with 2 swords that you have an impressive amount of control over. You can swing them in pretty much all directions and even hold them outward if you hold down the attack button. Once you start to find other weapons, you can switch between those on the fly, although they really don't lend themselves much to combat. You can use the grappling hook to swing off of these posts on the wall, and you can use some of the other weapons for clearing out obstacles in your path, but that's really about all they're good for. So the levels are non-linear, and there's an element of exploration here. Again, this is kind of like Metroid. I mentioned the platforming, and there's a lot of that in this game. Unfortunately, a lot of the levels consist of trying to make your way upwards, and that's where the game gets to be frustrating. Enemies respawn, the jumping is really stiff, and the platforms are positioned just deviously enough to be a total nuisance. The developers were either really dumb or insidious jerks. This is like trying to get to the top of the Sandcrawler in Super Star Wars. You've got a spinning jump similar to the screw attack in Metroid, and there's also a double jump maneuver you can pull off that helps a little, so that's something. I will say that the levels all look really cool, and there's a wide variety of stages. The haunting music also complements the spooky atmosphere quite nicely. You can find these potions along the way to help you out, although the potion system is a little unintuitive to say the least. So instead of something simple like, say, you find a health potion, consume it, and gain some health back, the game has an alchemy system. You have to combine potions that you find along the way in order to do stuff. Select 2 potions and then your guy will just be standing there holding 2 potions. Press B to combine them, and then, well, something happens. The manual gives you incomplete information on this as well. If you have the right combination, an icon will appear on the alchemy screen and then you can utilize it. The manual does tell you what each icon will do, but unfortunately it does not tell you the specific combinations. There are some useful potion combos here though, including different power-ups for your swords, invincibility, and a super jump, which further adds to the Metroid comparisons. Now, I mentioned before that awkward platforming and respawning enemies makes this game especially frustrating at times. Well, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that since you're technically the Forever Man and immortal, you basically have infinite continues. You can still, quote, get overwhelmed, end quote, by enemies if you run out of energy in a level, but you'll just start back at the entryway. Now for the bad news. There's a time limit to all this. An hourglass in the corner is constantly draining, and if it gets to 0 before you complete all of the phases, you have to start the whole plane over again. There is one combination of potions, though, that will flip the hourglass, so, I mean, that's something. The game also features a practice mode that gives you unlimited potions, so you can experiment with them and see what all they do, so that's pretty cool. So, this game has a lot of good things going for it. The graphics, the music, the storyline, but it's ridiculously tough, which can and most likely will be a turnoff for a lot of players. So while I definitely recommend trying it out, at least know what you're getting yourself into here. Some of these levels are incredible looking and really show off what the Genesis can do. Too bad most people won't ever get to see them at all. This game does have a following though, and for good reason. Once you get the hang of it, it can be a lot of fun. Or if you just want to see all of the game, you can cheat the system a little bit. I mentioned before the practice mode that gives you unlimited potions. Well, if you play through practice mode, you can only complete the first plane, and then the game tells you to try it on normal mode. However, if you go to this certain spot on the navigational plane and use the potions to make a doorway, you can instantly warp to the next plane and just play through the rest of the game. It at least gives you a chance to practice some of the levels before you have to go through it for real. Speaking of which, I do have to mention a spoiler here, so beware. As if this game wasn't Machiavellian enough, once you make it through the second plane, the game teases you like you just completed it. Credits roll and everything. Chakan stabs himself with a sword, waiting on Death to fulfill his promise and allow him to finally take his rest. But instead, Death taunts him and casually explains that there is evil all across every inhabitable planet in the universe, and there are all sorts of cosmic evil entities. Death decides to give you a chance to rid yourself of the curse by beating one cosmic evil entity, but here's the kicker. You only get one crack at it. If you lose, it's game over and you gotta go back through the whole process all over again. Man, that's just flat out mean. Oh yeah, and there's no battery backup saves or password feature either, so good luck. Granted, this final boss isn't too difficult, but still, also take a minute to appreciate this thing. There's a lot going on here. What are those, xenomorphs? And is this whole contraption being carried around by the underpants gnomes? What the heck is going on here? If you manage to survive that ordeal, you're greeted with an hourglass. That's it, just an hourglass. If you're patient or bored enough to sit there and watch it for 15 minutes, a message pops up. Not the end. And then the game just resets, so you're destined to do this forever. There weren't any official sequels to this game, although there was a Game Gear version with different iterations of the levels since the hardware was weaker. A sequel was said to be in development, but eventually was cancelled. Some folks seem to think the sequel morphed into the Legacy of Kain games, although I can't find an official source on that. So yeah, Chakan the Forever Man is just kind of an oddity on the Sega Genesis. Insanely difficult, but cool to check out all the same. Give this one a look if you're up for the challenge. What did you think of this one? Did you play it growing up? Did any of you out there actually beat this game? I'd love to hear about it. As always, thank you for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.